The scene begins at a car accident, where bystanders rush to the scene, calling for an ambulance because someone is trapped inside the vehicle. The person inside the car believes he is about to die, alone and without friends or family, having nothing of value left behind and no special memories to cherish. His life has been filled with loneliness, and he wonders what the afterlife will be like. The scene shifts to an elven family in a different world, where Elise, the protagonist, tells his father that he is going into the forest alone to forage. His mother asks if that's wise, reminding him that the forest is full of dangers. She expresses her concern, stating that Lise is only 10 years old and should be at least 30 before venturing out there. However, Lise insists that they shouldn't worry. At this time of year, the muscular wolves won't be a threat. His mother still hesitates to let him go alone. Lise mentions that the life of foraging and napping in the forest is simple and easy for him. His father notes that Lise is growing up quickly compared to others. Lise's mother touches his face, voicing her worry about him maturing too fast, especially considering that the lifespan of elves can last for 1,000 years. Lise reflects on this, recalling how he should have died in a terrible accident. Instead, he was reincarnated as a member of the elf species, who typically live for 1,000 years, and now he enjoys life as Lise. Even though he didn't know what had caused it, he believed that this must have been the second chance given to him by the gods, and he was determined to live his best life without any regrets in this world. Over the course of 10 years, he had embraced this new life, laying the groundwork for a bright future. However, due to the long lifespan of the elves, the concept of time felt loose and fluid. Furthermore, the village surrounding the ancient tree of Yggdrasil was protected by a massive, imperceptible barrier. With the threat of disasters and the danger from magical beasts largely non-existent, the fruit born from Yggdrasil was abundant and had become a staple food for the villagers. The elves thrived in this environment, born to live in harmony with their surroundings. Most elves spent their 1,000 years in this village without ever seeing the outside world. As he was about to speak, the patriarch, an elderly man leaning on a staff, approached and remarked that Klein's child was as energetic as ever. He noted that Lise had just learned to speak 5 years ago, yet he was already curious about the outside world. Lise's mother apologized to the patriarch, who reassured her that it was fine. He acknowledged that a few elves had shown interest in the outside world, but he cautioned that it was a perilous path. Having served as patriarch for 600 years, he had seen many elves venture outside, only to meet tragic ends, especially those who associated with humans, who often faced woeful fates. This made the outside world a dangerous place. The patriarch asked Lise if he still wished to explore the outside world, noting that Lise was more intelligent than the others. Lise expressed his gratitude to his parents for raising him and appreciation for everyone in the forest. He mentioned his desire to leave evidence that he had lived in this world. He thought that even if he had 1,000 years to live, he didn't want to remain confined to a small world. He wanted to learn various things and meet many different people. Once again, he stated that he wanted to live his life without any regrets. His father replied that if Lise was truly determined, they wouldn't stop him. The patriarch gently patted Lise on the head and remarked that it had been hundreds of years since Lee Browley had ventured into the outside world. Now the patriarch was willing to allow Lise to do the same, provided he passed the examination. Excited, Lise agreed to this challenge. The patriarch instructed him to master the peak of elven recovery magic, which resided within his soul within a century. Lise wondered about the significance of 100 years. The patriarch explained that it was important because the outside world was dangerous, and Lise needed to be able to protect himself. If he passed the examination within 100 years, the patriarch would grant him permission to explore the outside world, and he asked if Lise understood. Lise contemplated that 100 years seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it was merely a tenth of an elf's lifespan. He felt that if this was the only condition to venture outside, it would be a worthwhile challenge. Lise agreed, and the patriarch cautioned him that the exam was not something he could pass half-heartedly. This could not be forgotten. After 10 years had passed, Lise was now testing his recovery magic. As he healed an ancient tree, the patriarch was shocked to see that the great progenitor, who had surpassed 1,000 years of age, had been restored. This magic represented the pinnacle of elven magic, ultimate recovery magic. The patriarch was astonished that only 10 years had elapsed since Lise began his training. He asked Lise to explain how he had achieved this remarkable feat. Lise replied that he had been training his magical power since he was little. The patriarch inquired when he had started. Lise mentioned that he was currently 22 years old, so he had likely begun when he was around 5. He realized that before he obtained permission from the patriarch to venture into the forest, he had already made some arrangements for his future. The first part of his plan was to cultivate and enhance his overall magical power. He recalled that there was a vast library within the ancient tree, filled with an abundance of magic manuals written by humans. Through his studies, he learned that the magical potential of humans is typically established by the age of 20. Lees understood that there were 3 key elements to success: circumstance, aptitude, and effort. The frequency with which someone could release their magical power was directly related to the increase in their magical capacity. This understanding clarified many things for Lees. With this knowledge, he pushed himself to the limit, using his recovery magic repeatedly until he nearly exhausted his power. However, he realized that the average lifespan of a human was around 60 years, which meant their magical power typically increased until they reached the age of 20. This led him to wonder what would happen if an elf practiced their techniques. He speculated that his magical power could continue to grow until he reached the age of 300. The patriarch was astonished. He had never expected anyone to attain the peak of recovery magic so quickly, especially with 80 years remaining until the examination concluded. Lees then mentioned that he had read in a magic manual that elves specialize in recovery magic, dwarves in earth magic, and demons in different kinds of magic suited to their species. However, through study and training, he believed that it was theoretically possible to use other types of magic as well. In the library of the forest, most magic manuals focused solely on recovery magic, so he asked the patriarch if there were any manuals for other types of magic available elsewhere. The patriarch, shocked, agreed and asked if Lees truly intended to acquire other forms of magic. Lees agreed, stating that until the exam concluded in 80 years, he wanted to accomplish as much as possible. The patriarch noted that even now, when demons no longer existed, the passion for studying magic was something even elves could not help but inherit. He then handed Lees the key to the forest's library, which granted access to forbidden books as well. However, he cautioned that the magic manuals for which Lees had no aptitude would require considerable time to comprehend. Even if he understood them, it might take him 100 years. Lees accepted the key with gratitude, promising that he would do his best to reach the peak of all types of magic. The patriarch advised him to remain calm in his pursuits. After reading extensively in the library, 10 more years passed. Lees reflected that it was now time for his appointment. By the age of 30, he had mastered all types of magic as he had promised, and he wondered what kind of magic manuals he would find at that time. The patriarch had also entrusted him with the responsibility of maintaining and managing the library. Excited, Lees ventured out to seek new manuals in the outside world, marking a significant day for him. The elves' only interaction with the outside world was through the humans who managed the surrounding area, particularly the House of Verlanda. The former patriarch and the family head had forged a pledge, initiating a long-standing cultural exchange between their peoples. Lees sought to gather magic manuals from the outside world, transforming products from the ancient trees into capital and making a deal with the family head, Grillet Garlanda. While sitting on a tree branch, he recalled a young elf who referred to him as Master, commenting that no human could keep up with Lees's training in human magic, a practice that was entirely outside the norms of elven tradition. Afterward, the young elf suggested that Lees meet his childhood friend. Lees paused in his thoughts, remembering their last encounter. Just then, he spotted a carriage approaching. At first, he mistook the figure inside for Grillet, but he quickly realized that the boy's appearance had changed significantly since they last met. As the boy looked around, Lees hid his hand, causing Grillet to flinch slightly in surprise. Lees stepped forward, greeting him and referring to him as Grillet. He remarked that it had been a long time and inquired about the kind of magic manual Grillet had brought this time. The boy was taken aback to see him and exclaimed that it was true. Lees really existed, just as his father had told him. Lees wondered which father the boy meant. The boy knelt before him, explaining that this was his first time meeting Lees and that he was the son of Grillet, named Gallius. He continued, saying that his father had told him stories about Lees. Realizing that this was Gallius, the son of Grillet, Lees couldn't help but think that they had only met a few days ago. Gallius explained that his father had wanted to come in person, but no one could resist the passage of time, and Grillet was no exception. As he began to feel the weight of his father's years, Gallius, being the eldest child, decided to visit, hoping his presence would be permissible. Lees then asked Gallius when Grillet had last come to the forest. Gallius replied that his mother and father had married around 2 years ago, which meant it had been approximately 22 years since Grillet's last visit. Lees reflected on how just 22 years had passed. Since becoming an elf, he had completely lost track of time, but he recognized how swiftly a human's life could change. When Lees mentioned that he would be leaving the forest soon, Gallius was taken aback to learn that Lise had only 7 years left before his departure. Lise nodded, realizing that by human standards he was already 93 years old. He added that if he were to leave the forest, he must pay a visit to Gallius's family, and asked Gallius to tell Grillet that Lise would be delighted to meet him. Gallius, filled with joy, grabbed Lise's hand and agreed, assuring him that his father would be equally pleased to hear the news. After saying goodbye, Gallius departed, leaving Lise to contemplate his future. He thought that as long as he could overcome the patriarch's trial, he would surely be able to meet Grillet. Returning to the library, Lise pulled out a multitude of books, spreading them across the floor. He mused that he wouldn't be bored during the remaining years in the forest. Selecting a book, he began to read tales of heroes ill-suited for magic. The stories reminded him of nursery tales, recounting how a hero once defeated a demon king, sparking his imagination and filling him with inspiration for his own journey ahead. Lise contemplated the world beyond the forest, recognizing that the demons had long since perished and that even the existence of elves might be doubted by humans. As he continued to explore the library, he discovered an ancient book that seemed to be a long-forgotten magic manual. The condition of the book was fragile, its pages yellowed with age. Intrigued, he began to read about various movement magics, convinced he could at least grasp some of its concepts. Having already mastered all types of magic, Lise was eager to delve into the realm of ancient magic as well. He recalled that long ago, extinct demi-humans wielded powerful magic, while former demons had used their arcane abilities to exert control over the world. These ancient magics were diverse and distinct from the 4 basic types, often requiring special conditions to invoke. Many spells took months or even years to comprehend, but the prospect of unlocking such knowledge excited him. Determined, Lise lifted the book and resolved to try out a spell, intending to practice near the house. He chanted the incantation for the movement magic, Bizandali, feeling an unusual energy course through him. As he completed the chant, he wondered if he had indeed pronounced the spell correctly on his first attempt. In an instant, he found himself teleported into a dense forest. The air was thick with tension, and as he opened his eyes, he was immediately struck by the unsettling growl of a creature nearby. The scent of blood permeated the air, heightening his senses and sending a shiver down his spine. Lise realized he had entered a realm far more perilous than he had anticipated. As Lise gathered his bearings, he realized he was standing before a group of monstrous creatures, their menacing forms looming around him. Behind him, he noticed a few humans, their expressions a mix of confusion and alarm. They whispered among themselves, wondering where he had come from and if he was one of the guild's posse. Lise felt a wave of confusion wash over him. He had no idea what they were talking about. It seemed that, despite successfully using the movement magic, he had somehow exited the protective barrier surrounding his forest. His mind raced as he assessed the situation. Then his gaze fell upon a human child lying near the feet of the monster. She was injured but remarkably still alive. Concern flooded through him. Driven by instinct, Lise moved closer to the child, determined to help her escape the looming danger. He remembered that after leaving, he had learned and cast a brand new movement spell. He was supposed to appear somewhere near the house, but it seemed he had landed in an unknown place. Judging by the situation, it appeared he was outside of Yggdrasil's concealing barrier, and behind him stood humans he had never met before. Those people were asking him who he was and whether the guild had sent him. Lise thought there was a pack of beasts in front of him, and that a child had been attacked by them. One man explained that they were being pursued not only by magic beasts, but also by the guild's thugs and their merchandise. He lamented that their luck was truly terrible. Suddenly, a wolf roared, and the group realized it was aiming for them. Panic set in, and they all began to run. Lise noted that although they intended to use him as bait, he would not allow that to happen. Setting aside the injured child, he refused to let their plan succeed. Lise then cast the shadow spell, Black Whip, to capture them all. The people wondered what this strange thing was that had ensnared them, leaving them unable to move. Lise turned toward the injured child, thinking he could help. Just then, he saw the wolves rushing toward him. He activated the hardening spell, enhancing his magic, and then struck one of the wolves with the beast fist. The injured child watched as Lise fought. Lise noted that it was his first time using the strengthening magic created by a beast man, and he hadn't expected it to work on his muscles. He quickly dispatched the next beast. One man noticed Lise's ears and asked his boss if they belonged to an elf. The boss questioned why a being that only existed in legend would be in such a place. The third man chimed in, saying it was rumored that elves could only use recovery magic. Afterward, Lise looked at the child and realized she seemed to be the only one barely breathing. If she was still alive, he could heal her. He approached the girl, reassuring her that it was fine and that she would regain her strength shortly. Lise activated the dragon's healing breath skill to restore her health. One man wondered if Lise was burning the child. His boss denied this, explaining that the girl was absorbing the flames. Finally, the girl was healed, and in shock, the man remarked that a wound which could only be cured by grand recovery magic had been healed in an instant. As the girl tried to say something, she pointed to a collar around her neck. Lise understood, noting that it had a binding magic applied to it, preventing her from speaking. She nodded in agreement. He touched the collar and explained that if anyone other than her master attempted to remove it, it would collapse. He realized that magic tools had been made for slaves and fully grasped the situation. Then he told her to hang in there and that she could trust him. First, he would remove the spell from the collar. He needed to infuse it with more magical power than it already possessed while simultaneously introducing some destruction magic. Lise cast the destruction spell, Devil's Thread, and as he took off the collar, he threw it aside just before it exploded. He told the girl that she had done well to hold on during that ordeal. The boss remarked that Lise had likely destroyed a magic seal. One man asked if Lise was really an elf. Lise approached them, wondering what to do now that they had figured him out. The boss explained that they had been tasked with protecting the children, but their luck had run out when they encountered a pack of muscle wolves. They had even attempted to fight back, but those beasts had split them up and devoured them one by one. Lise had helped save them, otherwise everyone would have been killed and eaten. Gratefully, they asked him to release them all. Lise wondered if they truly intended to help and realized that they might have understood his position. But he was an elf. Thanks to his extensive experience, he had learned of their plan to steal everything. They were shocked to hear that he knew about their scheme, and he informed them that he would ask them 3 questions. First, he wanted to know who they were. Second, he asked what they had been changed for. Lastly, he inquired about their goal in taking the small children while traveling through such a dangerous forest. He warned them that if they answered him honestly, he would spare their lives. They became frightened and promised to respond truthfully. Finally, they admitted that they were simply hired slave traders and that there were parents willing to sell their children when they needed money. For the second question, they explained that they were being chased because someone in the guild had set them up. As for the third question, they revealed that while they were on their way to deliver the merchandise for a deal, pursuers had begun chasing them, leaving them no choice but to take the forest path to escape. Lise reflected that in this world, the nature of humans had changed little from that of his own. He recalled the words of the patriarch, who had warned him never to get involved with humans, as they were ferocious, savage, and sneaky beings. The patriarch had urged him not to forget those words. Lise stopped reminiscing, and the boss insisted that since they had answered all the questions correctly, he should let them go. Lise acknowledged that the patriarch often advised against getting too involved with humans, suggesting that they would forget they had ever met him. Just as he was about to take action, the boss asked what he was talking about. Lise cast the memory alteration spell, Memory Burial. As they all seemed to go blank, he decided to leave them there for now. The girl tugged at his shirt, referring to him as her savior, and asked if he was an elf. He nodded and introduced himself as Lise. He felt relieved that she could speak again and apologized for not being able to help the other children. He then noticed a cross-shaped scar etched into her chest, likely created by the magic tools as proof of her status as a slave. She told him that if she were stronger, she could surely help those children, at least enough to protect them, but she felt powerless to do anything. The magic that Lise used seemed incredibly strong, and she wanted to be strong as well. That's why she asked him to take her with him. Lise felt an awkward twist in her words. If she wanted to become strong, it was clear she harbored a deep resolve within her. Although he had been warned to avoid getting involved with humans, he found he could not abandon her. Since he had already meddled in this affair, he felt a sense of responsibility to bring her back home. He reminded himself that he was no longer human. He stood up, apologizing as he told her that he wouldn't be able to help her at that moment. He thought about how, after being reincarnated as an elf, his lifespan had increased significantly. The way elves experienced the flow of time was far different from how he had felt as a human. Allowing her to accompany him, knowing their perceptions of time differed so greatly, felt wrong. Moreover, he would have to wait 7 more years before he could leave for the outside world. While that might seem like a short time for him, it would be a very long wait for her. He couldn't bear to erase such determination from her. He decided to render her unconscious. Just then, he heard some people approaching, wondering about the slave traders in the area and intent on preventing their escape. Lise decided to leave the rest to the guild. He jumped to a tree branch, reassuring himself that in 7 years, if the girl's determination remained unchanged, they would surely meet again. Afterward, he returned to the library, where he later heard rumors of an incredible girl who called herself the Nameless Woman. She was said to possess great vigor and had achieved remarkable military feats. Finally, 100 years had passed since Lise became an elf, and a strange girl visited the patriarch's house. He apologized for summoning her, to which she replied that it was fine. The patriarch mentioned that Lise had always shown up there. He reminisced about how he had promised to train Lise until he reached 100 years of age, but it seemed that Lise's heart had not wavered. Elves were meant to live their lives in the village under the protection of Yggdrasil. The patriarch then asked the girl what she thought might happen if such an elf were to venture outside, likening it to a baby mouse jumping into a battlefield. The girl responded that the outcome would be clear once they saw the fire. As Lise gazed outside, he thought to himself that the day had finally come. He had trained for 100 years for this moment, and now the day of the exam that would allow him to leave the confines of his home had arrived. The patriarch met with Lise to inform him that the examination was finally over. After spending a century in training, Lise's desire to leave the ancient forest had not changed. Lise agreed with this sentiment. Just then, they heard a voice addressing the patriarch, remarking that it seemed they had quite the lively child preparing for departure. Lise noted that although someone was speaking, he was unable to see the person. The patriarch explained that the speaker had neither lost to him, nor was Lise inferior in any way, which was troubling. The voice continued, stating that Lise must be a genius to have received the patriarch's permission to leave after only a century. The patriarch replied that Lise's level of genius was difficult to articulate, and that perhaps, with what he had accomplished, Lise would come to understand the extent of his own abilities. Then, a girl appeared in front of Lise, suggesting that he might have to look forward to what was to come. Shocked, Lise wondered where she had come from. She introduced herself as Rahab Lori and mentioned that she was just under 6 centuries old. Lise was fascinated by Rahab, realizing she was the one who mysteriously appeared to ill humans to cure them in exchange for valuable fruits. He expressed his excitement at finally meeting her. Rahab asked if people really spoke about her in such a manner. Lise mentioned that she was the one who had collected all those books from the outside world centuries ago and had been referenced countless times within them. He thought that compared to himself, she was like a veteran. She should know a great deal about the outside world. However, to his surprise, she was the complete opposite of what he had imagined, a brawny elf. Rahab mentioned that her examination was simple. He had to survive until she ran out of mana from attacking him. Lise wondered about the challenge of simply surviving. She added that she wouldn't mind if he used recovery magic during their bout. Having spent 3 centuries in training herself, she requested that he not go too hard on her. Lise thought that as long as he passed the exam, he could leave. He expressed his anticipation for that moment. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared beneath him, and rocks emerged from it to launch an attack. He jumped to dodge, shocked that she had cast such a powerful spell without even chanting. She had used the earth magic, Earthen Spear. Lise felt the strain on his magic foundation under the pressure, realizing she was already reading his movements. Another attack came at him, and he exclaimed that it wasn't fair. Rahab countered, explaining that humans were savage, sly, and cowardly beings. As her staff emitted magic, Lise realized she had prepared another spell. In the outside world, survival wasn't guaranteed by merely receiving. He needed to learn to fight if he wished to leave. Determined, he conjured the earth magic Varlang to create a barrier for himself, declaring it a spell comparable to her earthen spear. She remarked that he seemed interesting. Since he was an elf, she had thought he could only use recovery magic. Instead, it was almost as if he were human. Lise thought that his motivations stemmed from his previous life as a human. He then used the wind magic sylph to leap into the air. Rahab recognized it as grand magic and wondered if she could shoot him down from his elevated position. She then attacked him with fireballs. Lise assessed that her magic might not surpass higher ranks, yet it was challenging to cope with how she could cast spells without chanting. He reminded himself not to get distracted. Rahab commented that it was impressive and noted that her method of attack would be unrelenting. Soon enough, he wouldn't be able to escape her onslaught. As he dodged, she caught him off guard by asking why he wanted to venture into the outside world. He was surprised by the question, but answered that he believed an elf's life was very long. She replied that the elven village was to her a very peaceful place, more so than anywhere else in the world. Lise reflected that it had been 100 years since he was born an elf, and no matter how many times he had failed, he had dedicated himself to magic. However, all that preparation was meant to leave a mark on the world. He thought back to his previous life, where he hadn't dedicated himself to anything or formed deep connections with anyone, leaving him filled with regret until the end. In this new world, he wanted to know more, to enjoy life more fully than anyone else, and to be remembered by someone. To realize that dream, he felt he needed to leave the forest. He then stopped telling all of this to Rahab. She thought about it for a moment, and Lise also asked why she wanted to go to the outside world. Rahab showed them a fruit and explained that she wanted to eat a lot of tasty fruits. He was shocked to hear that, realizing she only lured people in exchange for fruits. She confessed that she had liked the fruit for a long time and that in the forest she could easily gather cuckoo fruits. However, after 50 years of eating them, she grew tired and wanted to try other fruits, which is why she wished to travel to the outside world. He was astonished and asked if she had trained for 300 years for this. She replied that she had done her best, and somehow 300 years had passed. He mentioned that he thought it was good that she only spent that much time training and inquired about her comrades who had left without training first. She replied that they had all been engulfed by the waves of the world. Thanks to her training, she was able to travel safely and had acquired the dark magic of humans over the past few centuries. It was this power that allowed her to enjoy various fruits from different lands. She then ate the fruit and remarked that at one point, she had found the outside world to be incredibly enjoyable. However, recently, the flavors of those fruits had declined in quality. He wondered about the food. Meanwhile, the patriarch was secretly watching them both. Rahab remarked that they had chatted for too long and suggested they continue the exam. Now it was the final part, where she would make use of all her power. She used fireballs and other spells to attack him, while he employed wind magic, summoning a sylph to try to dodge her onslaught. He realized that he could now only rely on chantless magic, yet she was capable of wielding several different elements simultaneously. If it came to that, he knew he should also attack. He summoned hardening magic and magic empowerment, using his beast fist to strike at the material and her spear to break it. She picked up one piece and remarked that he had managed to destroy it. Lise asked what it was. Rahab replied that it was a magic stone empowered by elemental magic crafted by humans. By inserting just a small amount of magical power, it automatically cast spells. Lise expressed surprise that humans could create something like that, noting that all the magic Rahab had used up to that point wasn't her own. He wondered if she was truly able to use that much magic without chanting. Rahab admitted that even now she could only use recovery magic. She explained that she had convinced people of her abilities through petty tricks. If a child couldn't do that, she would want to crush their dreams. However, Lise completely avoided her attacks, which were born from these tricks, and then congratulated him on passing the test. Feeling happy, he thanked her. She smiled at him and acknowledged that he had tried his hardest. She noted that if he had been born much earlier, it wouldn't be strange to consider him strong enough to be the calamitous demon king. He mentioned that it was a little overwhelming. The training he had persistently dedicated himself to for a century finally came to an end that day, and he had at last received his reward. The scene shifted to a market in the human world, where a girl entered a fruit shop, offering a polite excuse as she approached. The man behind the counter welcomed her warmly. She revealed her coins and declared that she wanted to buy all the fruits displayed before her. Shocked, the man asked if she truly intended to spend that much money on fruits again, inquiring about her reasoning. She whispered that it was because she had heard that elves loved fruits. When he pressed for more details, she replied that it was nothing and insisted he sell her the fruits. He agreed without hesitation. As she made her purchase, she thought about how she had eagerly awaited the day she would meet him again. As Lisa's party collected the fruits, he approached them with the patriarch, announcing that he had passed the test. His father exclaimed how amazing that was. The patriarch confirmed that he had witnessed it with his own eyes. Lisa's mother suggested he take a short break at home, noting that 10 years would be just fine. Lise thought to himself that, as usual, the elven perception of time was quite different. He mentioned that he had already planned to leave the next day. His mother advised him not to be in such a hurry, reminding him that, at 100 years of age, he was still a child. Lise explained that he had taken an exam with his senior, Rahab, who knew a great deal about the world and had given him her approval. His father asked if he was referring to Rahab Lori. Lise inquired if his father knew her. His father replied that Rahab was like a little sister to him and recounted the time when he had ventured into the nearby forest for the first time, noting that Rahab had already begun studying recovery magic. He added that if Rahab recognized Lise's abilities, then there was no way he wouldn't either. Lise was truly set on going out into the world. As Lise agreed, his father turned to retrieve something, asking Lise to make a wish. His mother then interjected that before Lise went off to distant lands, she needed to do some motherly things for him first. Lise was surprised by her insistence. She asked him to sit down. As he sat there, his mother approached him, expressing her desire for him to keep something special. She handed him a locket, explaining that it had helped keep her hair beautiful for a long time. She told him that when she and Lisi's father got married, the divine tree Yggdrasil had given it to her as a charm. If Lise wore it, the divine tree's influence would always be there to protect him. He noted that it seemed like an important item. As he began to say he was already 100 years old, she hugged him from behind and asked him to promise that if he ever messed up and left before they did, it would be terrible. He agreed and made her that promise. Then Lisi's father called him over to show him some boxes, explaining that although it might not be enough, he had prepared provisions for Lise to last 10 years. Lise was shocked by the sight of it all. His father continued, saying that he knew Lise would want to leave for the best someday, which was why he had been saving everything. Lise's mother interjected, saying they needed to wait, as Lise couldn't possibly carry all of that by himself. Lise denied this and demonstrated his storage magic, Sematus, explaining that he had applied a technique akin to movement magic. By interfering with subspace, anything placed inside would not rot or spoil and would be preserved as it was. His father and mother were delighted by this revelation, and his mother expressed a wish to have it as well. The patriarch thought to himself that it was truly an impressive feat of ancient magic. The next day, Lise was all set to leave. With a wave of his hand, he finally departed. His mother remarked that it would be lonely from now on, but she was sure they would live together again someday. As he walked, Lise thought about greeting Rahab once more, but she was probably already gone. His destination now was the House of Garland. He reflected on the sole noble house of humanity that interacted with Elven Kand, the House of Garland, and recalled the promise he had made 7 years ago to Gallius. Although he hadn't been able to meet them before due to his illness, he was eager to see Grillet. As he approached Yggdrasil's protective barrier, he passed through it, stepping into the outside world. He noted that the weather was fine and clear, ideal for venturing forth. Suddenly, he heard growling behind him and noticed several beasts approaching. Just then, a girl appeared, using fire magic to unleash a phalanx that swiftly dispatched the wolves with a single swing. Lise was taken aback by her efficiency. As she turned to him and approached, he felt a flicker of fear. She knelt down and said she had been waiting for him for 7 years. Lise noticed a cross-shaped wound on her cheek and realized it was the same girl he had saved 7 years ago. She confirmed his recognition, stating that her memories from that time were vague in places, but she had held on to the hope inspired by his words and had trained herself for that moment. He replied that he never imagined she would adhere to his words to such an extent. She agreed with him. He thought back to the day when he had healed her and saved her from the brink of death. She had vowed to become stronger. He was sure he had used magic to seal those memories deep within her heart, yet despite that, she still remembered the words he had left behind all those years ago, beyond his expectations. Then the girl dragged over a box and said that since he remembered her, she hoped to give it to him if he was willing to accept it. Lise was taken aback by the size of the box and asked if she minded him looking inside. She nodded in agreement, and as he opened it, he found it full of fruits. She explained that she had heard all elves liked various fruits, from the Kachura fruits of tropical habitats in the western reaches to the frost fruits from the farthest northern continent. She had gathered all kinds of fruits from around the world for him and requested that he eat as much as he wanted. Lise wondered if the elven love for fruit was truly spreading among humanity, and he considered that it might be Rahab's influence. He asked her how long it had taken her to gather so many fruits. She replied that she had used all the money she earned from bounty hunting. He was shocked to hear that and exclaimed that it was an astonishing amount of money. She insisted that it still wasn't enough. He denied her assertion, stating that it was truly far too much. Lise wondered if she was okay. It felt like both of them had their own problems, knowing far too little about the world outside. He accepted her gratitude, but suddenly she asked if he was going anywhere and insisted on accompanying him. When he hesitated and said maybe, she explained that she had experience as an adventurer and could guide him, which would also make her useful for negotiations with humans. He acknowledged that this was true, realizing that since he had just left the village, he lacked information about the outside world. More importantly, as an elf rarely seen beyond the confines of his homeland, it would be reassuring to have a human accompany him. He then asked if there would be any issues with her joining him. She confidently replied that she had done everything she could while waiting for this day, so there was nothing to worry about. Confused, he asked if that was really the case. She nodded and continued, saying that because she wanted to become strong, she wished to learn from his strength for as long as she lived. Lise thought her insistence was remarkable, but he couldn't help but wonder about her words, as long as she lived. Considering her age, that might amount to around 40 years or so. He was shocked to think she was planning to stick with him for 40 years, even if it felt somewhat overwhelming. While he was pleased to be viewed in such a way, it was still just 40 years. He then told her that he wanted to go to the House of Garland. She mentioned that it was located in the Garland Marsh. Asking for a moment, she began searching through her map. He thanked her for her help. At the same time, he activated his Samata skill to take out a fruit, thinking it would be nice to have one for now. As he took a bite, he was pleasantly surprised by the tingling sensation it gave him. Minori called out to him, confirming she understood his enthusiasm. He felt a rush of happiness and urged her to let's go. She agreed with a smile. Firstly, they both approached a man, and Minori told him that she would like to cash in 1 horned rabbit and 3 slimes, asking what the best offer he could provide would be. She overheard other people referring to her as the strange lady, and she shouted that her name was Minori. They both felt a bit confused. Lise was currently wearing an overcoat to conceal his ears, and thought it seemed like Minori was quite famous here. She mentioned that it looked like they would have enough to reach Margrave Garland's frontier. A man asked if they were really going to Gallius, the feudal lord of that area, who had taken over from the previous lord. Since then, the economy had increased rapidly, primarily due to a surge in requests to hunt magical beasts, allowing adventurers to finally have enough to put food on their plates. Lise thought about how it had been 7 years since he met Gallius. The scene shifts to 3 years after he emerged from the land of elves. As he and Minori walked, she pointed ahead and asked him to look. If they crossed the path, they would be able to see Fort Kukir, which is part of Margrave Garland's frontier, just a little further ahead. He thought that for someone like him, who knew nothing about the outside world, Minori's presence was a blessing. Minori explained that they had come out of the woods and that Kukir should be around the border. The feudal lord of Garland kept many magical beasts in those forested borderlands, which helped protect the empire from the haunted forest. As Lise walked, he saw 2 people sleeping while sitting. He remarked that the closer they got to the fortress, the more casualties they encountered. Minori mentioned that she had recently heard about an invasion of magical beasts. Lise thought about Gallius, the feudal lord who had an extremely good reputation, yet he seemed unable to handle the surge of magical beasts. Lise took a bite of fruit and asked Minori if it was just him, or did that apple taste a bit off? He offered her a taste. When she took a bite of the fruit he had eaten, she asked if it was really okay for her to eat something he had touched with his lips. He assured her it was fine, and she ate it, commenting that she didn't taste anything unusual. In reality, she thought it tasted even better after Lise had taken a bite. Lise mused that the flavor of fruit had been declining lately. He then said he wanted to check something and used his observation magic, Gronosis, on the fruit. He discovered it was composed of 80% water, 12% sugar, and 1% each of other components and miasma. The presence of miasma shocked him, and when Minori asked how it was, he downplayed it, saying it was nothing and that it was just delicious, encouraging her to have some more. She felt emotional hearing his kind words. He couldn't believe he had found one of the phenomena once controlled by demons, and it seemed to share the same name as one of their special particles, miasma, although there shouldn't be any demons left in that world. They arrived at Fort Kukir, where Lise spoke to a guard. The guard was shocked to hear that Lise wanted to meet Lord Gallius, explaining that Gallius was a noble competing for one of the top spots in the empire, and there was no way he would allow them to meet him. Lise replied that he was a friend of Gallius and asked the guard to simply pass his name along. The guard stated that he had been serving there for 5 years and remembered the face of everyone who passed through, but he did not recognize Lise. Minori became angry, pointing out that if the guard was insulting Lise, he was insulting her as well. Just then, Gallius approached, commenting on the noise and quickly recognizing Lise. Lise greeted him and asked how he was. Gallius expressed his disbelief that it was really Lise, as 7 years had passed since they last met. The reunion shocked the guard. Gallius told Lise that he was glad Lise remembered his promise. Lise explained that he had come to meet both Gallius and Grillet. Gallius informed Lise about a past conversation he had with Grillet, mentioning that Lise had to pass a test to exit the forest. Once Lise made it out, Gallius encouraged him to visit their village, which was known to be a place only elves were aware of. Lise agreed and told Gallius that he had something he wanted Grillet to do. He asked Grillet to ensure he didn't die until Lise left the forest. Grillet agreed and told Lise to get out of the forest as quickly as he could. Lise promised he would. Gallius understood the promise his father had made to Lise. Minori asked Lise if he had also been friends with the previous feudal lord. Lise replied that Gallius was a bit different from Grillet. Minori asked if that was the case. Gallius explained that he wasn't very good at fighting, while his father had earned the nickname God of War for his combat prowess. Minori inquired about the kind of relationship Lise had with Grillet. Lise responded that Grillet was the first human to speak to him and was his friend. Gallius mentioned that his father had told him a lot about Lise, and when Lise emerged from the forest, They would both work hard to create some local beer, and he swore to make the world a better place. Lise replied that it was good to hear, but he wondered what he would do if he had forgotten their promise. Gallius laughed and suggested that it would make his father a bad guy. He assured Lise that his father hadn't forgotten his promise, he just needed to fulfill it, although he was currently in a vegetative state. They then entered a room, and when Lise saw Grillet lying there, he asked if that was Grillet. Gallius explained that his father had been like that for 5 years, and the doctors had already given up on him. He was certain that his father would be happy to know that Lise had come to visit. Lise greeted Grillet, saying it had been a long time since they last met. Gallius added that his father had been a strong warrior who had protected them from pirate raids and magical beast attacks for 20 years. 5 years ago, someone had found Grillet seriously injured on the battlefield. Since then, he had remained unconscious, growing weaker by the day. Gallius had taken on the role of feudal lord, but he had to wield that power to protect the land. His father had fought to defend it alone, and even though he was gravely injured, Gallius had no idea how great his father truly was until he disappeared. Lise thought back to before his arrival, recalling the good reputation of Gallius, but he had no inkling of the severity of Grillet's health decline. Lise was certain that Gallius kept this information under wraps to prevent a panic. He wondered if Grillet had fought the magical beasts alone, and as he noticed the bruises on Grillet's hands, he decided to pull back the blanket. Minori asked what he was doing. Lise turned to Gallius and inquired if he knew anything about the bruises. Gallius explained that he was regarded as the most powerful white magician in the land, and even he was baffled by them. When he had seen those bruises, he had attempted the highest level of magic he could wield, but it hadn't worked. Lise then used his observation magic on Grillet and discovered that his body contained 91% miasma. He recognized that the bruises were a manifestation of the miasma, which was present in such a massive concentration within Grillet's body. Lise understood that the white magician couldn't combat such a high level of miasma concentration and that Grillet's body was rejecting it. He then asked Gallius if he had tried the highest level of healing magic. As Gallius agreed, Lise stated that they would have to go beyond that and use the ultimate recovery magic. He was sure that Gallius hadn't tried that yet. Gallius smiled and assured Lise that he was doing his best, but there was no way it would work. Lise insisted that he hadn't been sitting idle for the past 100 years. He had come to see his friend and couldn't leave without saying a word to him. Gallius understood what Lise was saying. Lise asked him to listen carefully and explained that even if Grillet were to wake up, he likely wouldn't have long to live, probably around 2 years. Lise then asked if Gallius wanted him to revive Grillet. Gallius replied that his father had always fought alone for them and that he had never been able to express his gratitude. He left everything to Gallius, saying that if Lise could bring Grillet back, there were hundreds of things he wanted to tell him. Lise agreed and prepared to use the ultimate recovery magic. He recalled the legend of how humans could theoretically release it, a process that took several decades to succeed, known as the pinnacle of recovery magic. With determination, Lise cast the ultimate recovery magic, Reborel. After a while, Grillet opened his eyes and upon seeing Lise, referred to him as Master. Lise asked how Grillet was doing and reminded him that he had come as promised. Gallius became emotional at the sight of his father awakening and embraced him tightly. Lise reflected that on that day, his 100 years of hard work were finally realized. Although he could only give Grillet 2 more years, he had succeeded in bringing new life to his friend. Grillet expressed his disbelief at waking up and finding his master beside him, noting how much Gallius had grown. Lise acknowledged that it must be hard for Grillet to take it all in. Grillet confirmed that Lise had kept his promise. Lise replied that he had, but he also had something he wanted to ask Grillet. He then inquired about what had happened that day. Grillet recounted that he had been almost certain that Fort Kukir was under attack by some kind of magical beast, but aside from that, he couldn't really remember what happened. It was as if his mind had gone all fuzzy. Lise suggested that the fuzziness might have been some kind of trick from the other side, possibly involving memory alteration magic. Grillet pondered this and asked if Lise believed that demons existed, which left him shocked. Lise explained that Grillet had a high concentration of miasma surrounding his body, a substance that could only be produced by demons. Grillet asked if Lise was implying that this was the work of demons and what he should do now. Lise replied that for starters they needed to remove that fuzz, and he asked Grillet if he would allow him to look inside his memories. Grillet requested that Lise be gentle. Lise then employed memory alteration magic, delving into the past. He soon found himself witnessing a conversation between 2 beings. One remarked dismissively about a mere human, stating that they had been thwarting their invasion efforts, but it seemed that this time they were out of luck and lacked the bravery factor. the second being asked what they should do next. One of the beings instructed the other to go and rough up a light, emphasizing that as long as they kept attacking Fort Kukure without destroying it, they should be able to come at them from the other side. The being noted that as soon as they found the person with the brave factor, they could nip that in the bud. Before they could resurrect the demon lord, it was imperative to eliminate all dissident factors. Lise turned to Grillet, acknowledging that he had witnessed some disturbing things. Grillet urged Lise not to say it. If he revealed that the demons from fairy tales were returning, the world would be thrown into chaos. Lise reassured him that he had a plan. Since they knew what the demons were after, it would be straightforward. Before the demons could act, they needed to find the person who possessed the brave factor. Grillet asked if that was for real. He could hardly believe that demons were back. Lise explained that there was no better proof than the altered magic that demons used. Just before Grillet passed out, the topic they had discussed emerged, the brave factor. Grillet remarked that if they believed it existed, did that mean the fairy tale was real? Lise clarified that Grillet was referring to the famous fairy tales, the legend of the hero that all of humankind knew. Grillet agreed, suggesting that it should indeed be the story. Lise recalled reading something about it in the Elven Village library, noting that the brave factor had been mentioned in the battle records as a force beyond this world. Grillet wondered if those demons were searching among the humans for the one with the brave factor. Lise concurred, stating that it was essential for them to find that person first, as the other side had no idea Grillet was onto them. Grillet revealed that from their conversations, he was certain the human with the brave factor was in Fort Kukure. It had been 20 years since he inherited that territory from his father, and it was a well-known fact that the number of magical beast subjugations there had spiked to an incredible amount. Following his collapse, adventurers from all over the world had arrived, eager to seize the best rewards, which had led to an increase in battles against the beasts. Lise mentioned that if it was just like the fairy tale, then the one with the brave factor must be among them. As he got up, Grillet called out to him. Lise replied that he would head to the front lines. Grillet asked why he would go so far. Lise responded that there was no need for him to shoulder everything alone anymore, and that he was finally living in the outside world. With 900 years ahead of him, what could be more boring than watching the world fall under the control of demons? A week later, the scene shifted to the dining hall of Grillet's mansion, where a delicious meal had already been prepared. Minori was starving for the food. A lady urged them to eat as much as they wanted. Lise also commented on how amazing the food was. Grillet then introduced Lise to his wife, Silpha. Lise asked if she was the childhood friend of Grillet that he had mentioned. Grillet confirmed that he had promised to introduce them both. Silpha asked if he really made such a promise to an elf. He replied that he had made that promise when he was still a king before they married. Silpha bowed to Lise, thanking him for everything he had done for her husband. No matter how much she expressed her gratitude, it would never be enough, and she even became emotional as she spoke. Lise mentioned that it was just what he had to do. Grillet remarked that his wife was truly adorable. Lise recalled Grillet's words about how he would propose to his childhood friend the next time he saw her and promised to make sure Lise met her as well. He stopped reminiscing and thought about how it was a shame that humans lived such short lives. Grillet was shocked and remarked that it was a strange way to praise his wife. Lise suggested they take them up on their offer, calling for Minori as well. She asked if she could eat, and he agreed. As she enjoyed the food, she exclaimed that it was delicious. Silpha said it was a heartfelt way to praise her cooking, which inspired her to make even more. Lise mentioned that they had been living off the magical beasts they encountered along the way, as well as nuts and fruits. While Minori was eating, Silpha commented that it reminded her of the time when Grillet was young. Grillet asserted that Silpha's cooking was the best in the whole world, and that had always been the case. She replied that it was quite flattering. Then Grillet asked Lise how he and Minori knew each other. Just then, Minori got up and declared that she was Lise's spouse, which left both Grillet and Lise in shock. Grillet exclaimed that so Lise has a wife as well. Lise tried to deny it, but when he turned to Minori, she reassured him that they would be together forever. Lise explained that Minori had expressed her desire to become stronger, and in exchange for teaching her about humans, he had allowed her to accompany him on his journey. As Minori's expression turned sad upon hearing this, Silpha approached her and asked if she wanted to try cooking something together. Minori shyly admitted she was only good at fighting and had never cooked before. Silpha reassured her that it was fine and that she didn't need to worry too much. After all, there was an old saying that the way to a man's heart was through his stomach. Upon hearing that, Minori smiled and said that Lise would be happy to hear it, so she would definitely give it her best try. As they both headed into the kitchen, Grillet called Lise and mentioned that he had heard it was really difficult for humans and elves to have children together, a fact that the chief had told him long ago. Lise asked why Grillet was bringing that topic up now. Grillet then inquired about what Lise intended to do about it. Lise replied that, unfortunately, he just didn't see any signs of Minori liking him at the moment. Grillet expressed his pity over the situation. Lise reflected that, in reality, she might have been pursuing those feelings for a very long time, despite the odds. As Lise and Minori were leaving, he assured her that they would be back. Grillet replied that he was counting on Lise. Gallius then interjected, mentioning that Lise was heading to the greatest circle forest, Vastera, located between Fort Kukir and Riedel, where magical beasts had been appearing frequently. It was quite an uncertain place to be, so they needed to remain cautious. Lise and Minori set off towards the forest, where Lise noted that it seemed to be a main area for adventurers hunting magical beasts heading for Kukir. Minori agreed, stating that she had been to the forest herself and had hunted magical beasts that made it all the way to the gates of the fort before. In that area, they could keep an eye out for both adventurers and those behind the magical beasts at the same time. Lise mentioned that, according to Grillet, there was a vacant house in the forest, and he was considering turning it into their base. Minori wondered if it was really possible to find the one with the brave factor, given that their only clue was a fairy tale. They would be searching for someone who couldn't use any elemental magic, but they wouldn't know for sure unless they asked everyone to demonstrate their magic in front of them. Lise replied that with his appraisal skill, he should be able to tell if someone possessed the hero factor. However, with so many adventurers around, they would have to appraise each one individually. Minori expressed her amazement and asked if he could truly use his magic to find the person with the hero factor. When he agreed, she turned her face away, saying he was impressive. He then activated his appraisal magic status. After a while, he asked Minori if she was okay with this approach. She asked what he meant. He explained that they had already discussed it, and that it could take a long time to find the one with the brave factor, which might hold them up in that forest for an extended period, possibly even years. He noted that she could miss out on her entire human life if they stayed there. Minori replied that she had already made up her mind. She had spent 7 years chasing after an illusion, and she had told him that for her, happiness meant staying by his side and growing stronger. She had decided to follow him for the rest of her life. Minori blushed and declared that even if he insisted he didn't want her to stay, she wouldn't leave him. Lise thought to himself that it was getting a little too close for comfort, and he turned away to calm down. Just then, Minori called out to him, saying she had spotted the house. Lise informed her that it was a 6-hour walk from Fort Kukir to that location. Minori asked what kind of house would be in the middle of the forest like that. He explained that before the area was overrun with monsters, Grillet's predecessor had used it as a vacation home. Upon hearing this, Minori assumed that a noble's vacation home would be luxurious, but when they arrived, they found the house in ruins. Lise suggested they start by cleaning it up. She seemed shocked, and Lise asked what was wrong with her. Overwhelmed, she explained that he had just used magic to clean everything up in an instant, and she had thought that this was finally her chance to be useful to him. He mentioned that it was handy, and that he had made a temporary contract with the spirits around them, which is known as spirit magic. He had deciphered this when he was 78. Noticing her deep depression, he asked why it affected her so profoundly. She replied that she wasn't feeling depressed. He insisted it was time for the finishing touch, and used Yggdrasil Sylph, a barrier magic. He then collected some soil from a nearby spot, prompting her to ask what he was doing. He urged her not to rush and to wait and see. Suddenly, the soil regrew, forming a shield around the house. Minori wondered what was happening. He explained that now the building had become invisible to the outside world, thanks to the barrier, and neither magic beasts nor demons would be able to find them as they searched for those with the brave factor. She remarked on how amazing it was, acknowledging that he truly could do everything by himself. She remembered how kind he had been and expressed her willingness to do anything for him, yet he continued to thank her. She knew he would be perfectly fine on his own, realizing that her desire to stay by his side was her own selfish wish. She had never known who her parents were. As a slave, she had merely existed to survive. Just when she was about to be killed, he had come to save her. And so, for the next 7 years, no one wanted to be in her party because she had once been a slave. She did everything she could to gain the power to survive, determined not to waste the gift she had been given. On the promised 7th year, she went to the agreed-upon spot every day, waiting for him while clinging to her memories. She longed to tell him that her wish had come true, but she couldn't bring herself to feel happy about it. She didn't want him to keep her by his side just to satisfy her own selfishness. Determined to be more than a burden, she thought of ways to be truly helpful to him. She wanted to become strong enough to fight alongside him. She called out to him, asking if he was planning to find the person with the brave factor and then defeat the demon lord together. Lise replied that if he could, he would, but he didn't possess the brave factor needed to defeat the demon lord yet. They might need to train together first, after he took them under his protection, though he wasn't sure how far into the future that would happen. Minori was confident that he could defeat the demon lord, and she asked if he would train her during their time together. He questioned whether she wasn't already strong enough. She responded that she also wanted to fight alongside Lise against the demon lord. Understanding her goal to become stronger, he agreed to train her. From that moment on, he pushed her hard in training, a baby from Gallius causing both Lise and Minori's faces to flush red. The scene shifts 2 years later, where they are both running through the forest. Calling out to him, Minori mentioned that she had detected 5 magic beasts at their 3 o'clock position. By using appraisal magic, she discovered that there were 4 B-rank beasts and 1 A-rank. Lise recognized that Minori had become quite adept at using appraisal magic. He agreed with her assessment and asked if she could take down the A-rank beast. Although she hesitated for a moment, she replied confidently that he could count on her, then pressed ahead. Lise soon spotted the cockatrices approaching from the side where Minori was running. He swiftly dispatched one using wind magic, but he felt a strange sensation as the creatures completely ignored Minori despite her killing intent. He realized they were actually fleeing. After that, they encountered an A-rank wild bear that was pursuing them. Minori prepared to use her high-ranking fire magic enchant. As the bear lunged to attack her, she unleashed her ultimate fire magic, Phoenix, striking the bear with a fire sword. After the attack, she took a deep breath, feeling exhilarated. Lise praised her, and she beamed with happiness, mentioning that she had successfully used her ultimate magic. He responded that she could now wield such powerful magic without any issues, and noted that she had even defeated a wild bear, which proved just how strong she had become. He extended his hand to her to help her up, and said to let's focus on training his stamina now, so he can continue fighting even after using that magic. With a gentle smile, she agreed. He sensed something different about her and reflected on how they had trained together in the forest for 2 years. Now, at the age of 20, she was officially an adult. Back at home, Minori prepared her secret recipe number 33, cockatrice wayakodon. After Lise finished eating, he remarked that it was another delicious dish and praised her cooking skills, noting how much she had improved over the past 2 years. She replied that it was all thanks to Silpha. Lise then asked if there was anything noteworthy happening at Fort Kukure. Minori informed him that the magic beasts were still increasing as always, but there was no information regarding the brave factor or the demon lord. Lise thought about how they hadn't even encountered the demons he had seen in Grillet's memories. He mentioned that it seemed things would remain the same for a while. Suddenly, a girl appeared at the window, making some noise. Minori got up to investigate, saying it was a magic messenger from Fort Kukure, and she would go check it out. Lise thought about how fascinating it was that a magic tool like that messenger existed, considering the interesting possibilities of magic tool research. Minori returned in a rush, calling out to him. He asked what was wrong. She replied that it was about Grillet. Lise was reminded that it had been nearly 2 years since he had healed Grillet. They then prepared to use teleportation magic. They arrived at the mansion of Garland, and as Lise called out for Gallius, the young lord expressed his gratitude for their visit. He also thanked Minori for accompanying him. Just then, Vice, the small girl, entered and greeted Lise. He returned her greeting warmly. Gallius informed Lise that his father was present but no longer conscious. However, he had asked to see Lise. Vice stepped inside as well, calling out to Grillet and letting everyone know that Lise was there. As Lise gazed at Grillet's face, he noted how peaceful he looked. Gallius remarked that Grillet appeared nothing like he had 2 years ago. During that time, Gallius had finally been able to talk things out with him. He explained that he had previously fumbled his way through his responsibilities as Lord, but now his father was teaching him everything he knew. More importantly, he had Vice by his side. As he spoke, tears welled in his eyes, and he expressed that it was all thanks to Lise. Lise reflected that 2 years had felt like a mere moment to him, yet everyone else had accepted the passage of time. He wondered if Grillet felt satisfied as well. Checking Grillet's pulse, he noted that it was still faint. Life was quietly waning away. Lise remembered that Grillet had been his first friend in this world and pondered when his hands had grown so small. As he contemplated, he wondered if it would be selfish to wish for just a little more time. Silphan encouraged Lise to proceed, assuring him that they would accept whatever he desired. Lise expressed his wish to speak with Grillet one last time. This revelation shocked Gallius, who asked how Lise could possibly do that. Lise explained that it would be possible through death magic known as necrosum, an ancient art that governs the cycle of life and death, once wielded by a legendary necromancer. He asked Gallius what he would say if he could see Grillet just one more time. Gallius replied earnestly that he would thank his father. Suddenly, Lys was teleported to a strange place where he saw a gate through which countless souls were passing. He realized it must lead to the afterlife. Just then, Grillet appeared and asked if it was really Lys. Upon turning to face him, Lys heard Grillet say it was not the right time for him to be there. Lys reassured Grillet, saying not to worry since he had been preparing for this moment. He then explained that he knew of a magic that could temporarily materialize souls, an ancient necromancy technique called necroris. This technique had been used by a renowned necromancer to summon the first demon lord, and the dragon came to his side, albeit temporarily. Though the method was limited, Lys promised that one day he would find a way to revive Grillet for real. Until that time came, he urged Grillet to wait for him. Grillet mentioned that Lys really could do anything. He then turned to leave, stating that it was fine and that he had lived long enough already. He thanked Lys for coming to see him off one last time. As Lys began to speak, Grillet continued, saying it was because of Lys that he was able to protect Fort Kukure. He could spend his final days in comfort, surrounded by family, and enjoy the company of his cute grandson. That was why he had no regrets. Lys asked if that was true. Grillet replied that he did have one regret, his lingering attachment to the fight against the talking beasts and demons. He explained that if the demon lord were to revive and unleash a rampage, humanity might be trampled in an instant. He asked Lys to promise that he would find the hero and defeat the demon lord, as Lys was the only one he could trust with the future of humanity. Lys promised, and as they held hands, Grillet reassured him that as long as Gallius was there, he didn't have to worry. He still felt the faint sensation of Lys's touch and remembered how Lys had held his hands. Even now his hands hadn't changed. They were still pale and smooth. Lys recalled the words of the patriarch. Elves didn't truly begin to age until they reached 800 years. This surprised Grillet, and he asked if the patriarch had lived for so many centuries. Lys lowered his head, and Grillet remarked that, from Lys's perspective, his life must have passed in a flash. He then thanked Lys for crying. As Lys cried, he recalled Gallius's words, "Thank you, and they could rest now." Grillet agreed, and, as he approached the gate, mentioned that he would wait for Lys on the other side and find some delicious steak to share with him. But he warned Lys not to come too soon. The next morning, Grillet passed away at the age of 58. He had defended Fort Kukure against numerous magic beasts and the war god, who had protected it for a brief 20 years under the watchful eyes of his family, peacefully died in his sleep, an ideal death that anyone could hope for. Meanwhile, Lys sat on the terrace, reflecting on how 2 years felt like such a short time. Minori, hiding and watching him, thought of how she could still feel Grillet's cold, wrinkled hands when he had held hers. She remembered his words describing how pale and smooth Lys's hands were. Just then, Minori called out loudly to him, and when he turned, she returned to her normal demeanor and urged him to come inside to rest. He noticed how pale, smooth, and warm her hands were, but he knew that one day they would also change. She looked at his face and asked if he was okay. He replied that it was nothing and that he was fine now. He thought about how the first friend he made in this world had died. Then he called out to Minori, swearing that he would surely defeat the demon lord, and no matter how many centuries it took, even if he had to do so without the hero, and even if the demon lord revived with all their power, stubbornly pursuing a goal for ages was Grillet's strong suit. Minori reminded Lys of his words that he didn't need a brave factor to defeat the demon lord. She agreed and mentioned that she would follow him everywhere. They continued heading downstairs and out of the mansion. Lys thought about his friend's legacy, the place Grillet had protected all his life, and realized that he could inherit it and make it part of his own. The scene shifts to a year later at the house in the forest where Lys and Minori were living. That night she mentioned that for dinner she had prepared her special dish number 48, fare steamed in white wine. As Lys tasted it, he remarked that her cooking had become even more delicious lately. She replied that she had experimented with all kinds of ingredients to enhance the flavors. He asked if it was alright to stop naming the dish after Silpha. Minori explained that Silpha had told her they should support the people they wanted to support. Lys thought that even a year after Grillet's death, Silpha continued to guide them from the afterlife. Minori added that when she met Silpha in the afterlife, she wanted to show her all the recipes she had created, and that she would fill the Minori special menu with all kinds of dishes. Lys smiled and agreed, looking forward to that day. At night, as they lay in bed and she slept, Lys woke up thinking about how exhausted Minori looked. She would turn 22 at the end of the year, and he recalled how she had seemed like a little kid when they first met. He felt that humanity moved too quickly, and he didn't want to accept that reality with Mintu. Suddenly, he heard a noise and wondered if someone was fighting. He could sense several different mana signatures rampaging in the forest. He thought of his appraisal skill, and as the aura from the trees spread, he gained insight into something significant. Just then, Minori woke up as well and asked what was happening. He moved closer to her, telling her that he had found someone with the brave factor. The scene shifts to half a day earlier, where a boy was struggling under the weight of his party's supplies. Another boy questioned whether they really had to look after a weakling like him, suggesting that if he couldn't carry their luggage, they should ditch him as soon as they got the chance. The boy was so exhausted that his legs trembled under the load. The second boy declared that was exactly what they meant when they said people who couldn't use magic were useless. He warned that if the boy dropped even a single item, he would have to pay for it in full. Even a girl in their party disapproved of this behavior but chose not to speak up. They all continued on their way, and the boy carrying the luggage encouraged himself by reminding himself that this was part of his training. As they pressed forward, the boy named Ryuk, the team leader, called for a halt. He advised them to wait, explaining that it was too dangerous to continue through the night forest, especially since strange mist had recently begun to emerge in the woods after dark, accompanied by reports of powerful creatures. He suggested to let's set up camp in a safe spot and move out in the morning. Ryuk replied that they didn't have time for such nonsense. One of the twin sisters expressed her desire to succeed in the Solura quest and return home quickly. The other twin remarked on how loud they were being. Meanwhile, a girl who was worried about the boy agreed that Ryuk had a valid point. The boy concurred and proposed they take a route that would minimize the chance of encountering dangerous monsters. They were a promising B-rank party, while Kuroshil, a mere baggage carrier who couldn't even use magic, felt out of place. Nevertheless, he encouraged them to keep moving forward. The boy thought it was fine to do what they could, but it soon became clear that they were scared of the monsters and running away. In his fear, Ryuk wondered what those creatures were. They were clearly not just regular monsters. A girl noted that it was a C-rank magic-eating snake, and there was also a C-rank magic boar, or at least that's what it should have been. Ryuk unleashed his advanced water magic, launching a water pressure cannon at the monster, but it was swallowed up without effect. The girl explained that they were doing no damage, as only A-rank monsters could absorb magic. Solera spoke about her magic, while Lula mentioned that her magical attacks weren't working either. Ryuk questioned how they, a B-rank party, could be overpowered by a mere C-rank monster. A girl then suggested they escape. As they ran, one of them noted that the monsters were still hot on their trail. Ryuk remarked that the dark aura emanating from them was troubling, wondering what it could possibly be. A girl explained that it was a collection of magical energy and likely the powerful entity referenced in Jin's intelligence report. She added that they should have heeded Jin's warning. Ryuk shouted at her to be quiet, reminding her that she had ignored the warnings too and shouldn't start whining now. Solera pointed out that if they didn't keep moving, the monsters would catch them, while Lula lamented that they were going to die. Jin suggested that continuing straight down the path would lead to their doom, and proposed that if they returned to the fortress, the route would be safer. Ryuk insisted that they weren't ready to go back yet. They had been working for years to carry their supplies and were determined to lighten their load and buy new equipment. A girl complained that it was too much. Ryuk replied that if she wanted to, she could take her share and stay behind. He decided that they would leave Jin there. Jin pleaded with him to listen, pointing out that there was a beast path nearby where smaller animals escaped from larger monsters, indicating there was still a way for all of them to survive. Ryuk questioned Jin's authority, especially since he couldn't even cast a single spell. He recalled their hometown bond, remembering how Jin had begged him to become an adventurer, but now felt that Jin was only dragging the party down. He didn't want to waste expensive magical tools on something like this, so he decided to rely on his skills. Using advanced water magic combined with earth magic, he created a muddy pit beneath Jin, causing him to sink. Jin felt the weight of the load pulling him down and realized he was getting stuck. He called out to Ryuk, asking what he was doing. Ryuk instructed Solera and Lula to retreat while the useless one distracted the monsters. They agreed and began to leave. The other girl, Kalar, had been standing still for what felt like an eternity, but finally started to run as well. Jin shouted that there was still a way for all of them to survive, but by then, they had already abandoned him. He thought about how if he could use magic like everyone else, he could have saved them. He had dreamed of becoming a strong adventurer since he was young, wanting to travel the world, defeat monsters, and protect the happiness of people. It all seemed so cool to him, yet he found himself lacking the most crucial ability for an adventurer, the power to use magic. Typically, people began developing their magical abilities around the age of 5, reaching their peak magical growth by 20. Meanwhile, his childhood friends in the party continued to grow stronger. while he remained stagnant. Despite this, he refused to give up. In place of magic, he focused on mastering swordsmanship, determined to help his comrades. He filled his mind with knowledge and information, hoping to find his own path to strength. However, there was still no way for him to surpass magic. Even ordinary magical tools were beyond his reach, forcing him to dismiss his dreams, as magic was paramount in their world. Just then, as the beasts closed in to attack him, he felt an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Suddenly, he saw a girl rushing in, wielding a sword wreathed in flames, and she swiftly killed one of the creatures. The girl was Minori, who cheerfully remarked that she had arrived just in time. Lise followed closely behind, commenting on how close the call had been and that she would take care of the magic boar. The boar appeared frightened, and Lise unleashed a powerful mixed magic attack known as Dragonia Breath. As Jin observed Lise's ears, he briefly thought she was an elf, wondering if it was truly the case. He marveled at her strength, realizing it had been a while since he had seen someone so formidable. He mentioned that with the right matchup, she don't have to worry about that magic snake over there. She agreed that they could take it down within 5 tries using their magical power, but he reassured her again not to worry about the others. He would protect that boy. Minori chimed in, expressing her desire to hear someone say they would protect her as well. Lise then approached Jin, stating that he had been abandoned by his comrades for being unable to use magic, as if they couldn't see the truth about him. She reminded him that instead of being unable to wield magic, he had been training his body and speed to their limits, believing that one day his magic would bloom. She encouraged him to keep pushing forward, no matter the challenges he faced. As Jin was about to ask her something, Lise suddenly used her power and gently placed a finger on his neck, saying that the power of patience was precisely the essence of being a hero. She then cast advanced healing magic known as the Smile of the Saint, and remarked how fortunate it was that someone like him possessed the hero factor. Jin was shocked to find that his wounds healed without the use of healing potions or any healing items, and it happened in an instant. He wondered if Lise was a legendary elf. Lise remarked that they should really carry their own gear, but she was still impressed by how Jin managed to traverse the uneven forest while carrying such a heavy load alongside his companions. She then asked if he had been doing that without magic all along, as most would typically use magical tools for transportation. Jin replied that he was born without any magical power, and he couldn't even use those tools. Lise sensed that he truly lacked a magical aura, but she noted that his arms and legs were incredibly muscular, a testament to his hard training to compensate for his lack of magic. Jin grew emotional as he expressed his wish to be stronger, wishing that his party had never abandoned him. Lise realized that in addition to blaming his companions for leaving him behind, Jin was also blaming himself for being weak. This self-awareness was a clear indication that he had awakened the hero factor within him. She encouraged him, saying he possessed the potential to become a formidable adventurer, and she would help make him stronger. If their resolve to become an adventurer falters now, that's where it will end. But if there's even a flicker of his wish to grow stronger, she continued, extending her hand to help Jin up. Jin was reminded of his past, of his dream to protect the smiles of the people by becoming an adventurer. With newfound determination, he declared that with the strength he had, he would strive to become someone great. Overwhelmed with emotion, he leaped toward Lise. Lise thinks that Minori and Jin demonstrate incredible resolve at their age, which is a far cry from his own past. He introduces himself as Lise, and Jin follows suit. Suddenly, they both hear screaming. Minori tells Lise that a magical boar is charging towards him. Jin comments that its fur resembles a bundle of thorns. Lise wonders if that's a hardening spell, and he prepares to counter it with his own hardening spell, the Least Fest. He also channels thunder magic to create the Thunder Fist and asks Jin to watch him. As the boar approaches, Lise declares that this moment is the culmination of 100 years of training, and he delivers a powerful blow to the wolf boar. The impact leaves Jin in shock. He reflects that in fairy tales, elves could only use healing magic, and he is amazed by Lise's prowess. Lise suggests they reunite with Minori, and Jin acknowledges that what he has witnessed is truly astonishing. Suddenly, a black, shapeless figure appears, addressing Lise as the hermit elf and asking why he is in such a place. Lise recognizes the voice from Grillet's memories and wonders if it is a magical beast. He senses a formidable miasma emanating from the figure. Looking at Jin, he sees that Jin is barely hanging on, teetering on the brink of unconsciousness. Lise greets the entity, saying it's nice to meet him, and though he speaks casually, the voice feels oddly familiar. He recounts the incident from 10 years ago, when that entity launched an assault on the Kukure fortress. His body is different now, perhaps some form of dark magic is at play. Lise is intrigued by how this being has managed to exist for so long as an intangible thought form, and he notes that it seems to have faded significantly compared to back then. The entity enters the body of a bear and mentions the forest's mausoleum, revealing that its soul is being summoned back to that world, trapped within this very vessel. It now exists merely as a vessel, drawing power directly from the demon lord's loyal subordinates. Lise thinks of the revered mausoleum and recalls ancient texts describing a land where a mighty entity known as the Divine Beast was imprisoned. In different terms, what stands before him is the magical boar, leading him to wonder if it could have once been one of the sealed divine beasts. If that is the case, he contemplates the so-called direct subordinates of the Demon King. They must possess enough magical power to temporarily bind the soul of a divine beast to a mere monster. Lise decides he should delve a little deeper into this mystery. He asks if that means the revival of the Demon King is drawing near. The boar replies that indeed, the revival is imminent, estimating it will occur in about 3 years. Once the Demon King is resurrected, the boar will finally be free from the limitations of this body. Lise states that until that moment, unless he is swallowed by the magical boar first, he asks if it understands. He compares this situation to the ambushed by Grillet, noting that his eternal form is inching closer to that of a beast, dragged down by the physical world until he becomes a true creature of this realm, and time is running out. The bear shouts at him, expressing annoyance. As it attacks, Lise saves Jin, asking if he is alright. Jin agrees, noting that the magical beast has revealed some important information. Lise explains that it was just a type of illusion magic, and it seems the mouth of truth is functioning as intended. Jin wonders when Lise casts such magic on the boar. Lise thinks that the boar's very existence is starting to waver. Even if it is a powerful divine beast, there must be a crack to exploit. The bear admits it can no longer predict how much longer its magic will last. For the past few years, it hasn't shown its true face, and now, with its life hanging in the balance, it must obey even the most outrageous commands. It has no choice but to keep waiting. Lise uses his appraisal skill to learn more about the wolf boar and mentions Yuva, the active commander of the Demon Lord's army, who is bonded with Vritra. The wild boar is shocked and asks how Lise knows that name. Lise realizes that the weaker the opponent, the easier it is to reveal information through appraisal magic, making it a piece of cake. Lise proposes that they make a deal. The bear, scared, asks what he means. Lise explains that he will conjure the bear's true form with his magic, and in exchange he would prefer if it stops chasing the adventurers as an emissary of the Demon King's army. The boar responds that there's no way the magic of a regular elf could accomplish such a feat. In response, Lise demonstrates his skills, asking if the boar doesn't think he could live in his original form for a while. The boar is shocked, asking what kind of insane magical energy Lise wields to match Yuva's power so effortlessly. Lise replies that it's roughly 1/5 of his full power, so there's no need to worry. He thinks the boar's surprised reaction shows how easily it is being pulled in by his magic. The boar states that it won't give him unreasonable orders and once again asks if it is alright for him to soar freely through the skies. Lise assures him that he won't interfere with his way of life as long as he doesn't cause any major problems, but he would love to have a chat every 100 years or so. The bear agrees, promising to protect Lise and keep his promise always. Lise accepts the deal and uses his power to transform the boar into its true form. Jin is shocked to see that it is a dragon of the dragon line. Lise remarks that it was originally quite a stunning sight. The dragon smiles, mentioning that this is the body he has always dreamed of. Lise asks how he feels now. The dragon replies that it isn't too shabby. With a fresh start, he could soar to the ends of the earth. Lise informs him that it will still take some time for his soul to fully anchor itself in the body, but fortunately, he doesn't plan to kick the bucket for another 900 years or so. If the dragon needs him, Lise will always be ready to lend him his magical power. The dragon asks if Lise truly intends to live longer than the dragon folk, who boast of lifespans of 5 centuries. If that is the case, how could he ever repay Lise's kindness? Lise acknowledges the dragon's earnestness and says that if that's the case, he would be pleased if the dragon could gather some delicious-looking fruits along the way. Providing magical power shouldn't be too burdensome for him. In fact, it's one of the very things Lise has always wished for. Lise thinks that after this, he will have achieved what he couldn't in his past life. If giving his body allows him to remain in Vritra's heart, then the 100 years of training since his reincarnation will have really paid off. The dragon expresses that Lise is indeed a most peculiar elf and that he is incredibly grateful for his kindness. Then he asks for Lise's name. Lise extends his hand for a fist shake and while doing so reveals his name. He shares that he too is an elf who longs to escape the confines of the world and roam freely in the vastness outside. The dragon laughs, declaring that they are kindred spirits. He then moves his head to gently touch fists with Lise and introduces himself as Vritra, vowing to be a lifelong friend to Lise Klein. While doing so, he also hands over something to Lise. Just then, Lise feels something different and remarks that it should be something Lise desires. Vritra invites Lise to come visit again after he has circled the globe, and then he flies away in a flash. Jin comments on how quickly they vanished. Lise reflects on the 500-year-old divine beast and how he has finally made a lifelong friend in this world. Just then, Minori arrives, excitedly announcing that she has defeated the snake. Lise shows his appreciation by ruffling her hair and telling her that she still has magic left. Her training has really paid off. Jin points out that to take down such a powerful foe all by themselves, they are nowhere close to being A-rank adventurers. Lise tells him that this is not the time for daydreaming. They have only 3 years until the demon lord arrives. Minori gasps in shock at the news. Lise places his hands on Jin's shoulders and tells him he has something important to share. Within him lies a force known as the Hero Factor, meant to challenge the Demon King. Shocked, Jin asks if such power truly resides within him. Lise replied that the Demon King could only be defeated by Jin, and he was certain that a grueling battle lay ahead. Therefore, over the next year, Jin must surpass the current Minori. Jin was shocked to hear such a daunting challenge. One morning, Minori was training Jin outside, discussing the supercharged fire elemental magic enhancement power illusion. Lise watched as Minori instructed Jin. She demonstrated the black flame spiral attack and announced that she was going all out. Jin replied that it was the wrong number -182, so he was ready for anything. The scene shifts back 182 days to the first day of their training, where Jin was asked to train with a wooden sword. Lise remarked that it was a bit different from the usual ones. Minori told him that there was a special training weapon that Master Lise had made for him, so he should accept it with care. Jin agreed. Lise explained that Jin didn't yet have any mana of his own, but he seemed to have the capacity to store mana internally, which was known as mana capacity. This capacity acted like a container where mana was stored, similar to how water fills a vessel. When they used all the mana stored in their capacity, it typically replenished itself over time, and then Jin's mana capacity would grow a little larger than before. Jin mentioned that he had read about this in a book on magical physiology. Lise was pleased to hear this and noted that Minori had also done the same. Minori agreed, stating that such intense training had left her bedridden for a week. Jin was shocked to hear about the training, which frightened Minori as well. Lise thought that she wanted Jin to undergo the same experience. Jin raised his hand and asked a question. If he didn't have any mana of his own, where would the source come from? Lise replied that she would fulfill Jin's mana capacity by providing him with mana directly. He would then transfer that mana into the wooden sword, which contained a magical device capable of storing mana. In this way, they could rapidly increase Jin's mana capacity. Lise explained that she wanted him to learn how to control it at the same time, emphasizing that those born with mana also had to learn how to use it. Like mastering a language, this process would take years, and it would be too long to wait for his own mana to develop naturally. Lise noted that since Jin currently had no mana, his body didn't need recovery mana, eliminating the need for it at the start. This would allow them to avoid the week-long recovery that Minori had needed, highlighting the flip side of the coin. He mentioned that it would be hard to manipulate the mana at first, and in the beginning it would be challenging to move it. However, once he got used to it, he could maintain that control throughout the entire day. Lise could restore his stamina using magic, and if they continued this training for a year, his mana capacity would grow 38 times larger, unlocking the hero factor within him. By that time, when he could produce mana on his own, he would already be among the strongest. Jin wondered if he could truly achieve something like that. Lise reminded him that on the last day, they had discussed the hero factor. Jin mentioned that only those who could defeat the Demon King possessed the hero factor. Lise responded that Jin had suggested he lacked mana, but a change in perspective revealed that he had a great deal of potential within him all along. Jin expressed his desire to become stronger, taking her hand and asking if that was still true. He replied that his most valuable trait was his unwavering determination to never give up. Since then, 3 years had passed since their rival had come, but Lise wanted to bet on Jin. The scene shifted back to the present, where Minori rushed to attack him with all her strength. Jin encouraged her to do just that. Lise thought to herself that this was the 182nd duel between Jin and Minori, marking the same amount of time that had passed since their training began. Jin focused on unifying his body and sword, letting the sensation flow from the sword into his body. He felt the flow of mana just as Minori's sword struck against his. He noted that it was a mana disruption. Lise recognized that it had been activated. Minori insisted that it wasn't bad and declared that she couldn't lose yet. With determination, she slashed toward Jin, promising that she wouldn't give up. Her attack landed solidly, causing Jin to fall back. Lise rushed at him, reminding him that she knew he wanted to push himself, but recovery was limited to once a day. Attempting more would put unnecessary strain on his body. In response, he activated Alenja's embrace. As Lise turned, Jin mentioned that the mana disruption he had activated meant he could now use magic. Lise acknowledged that he had already performed well over the last 6 months. Overcome with emotion, Jin got up and declared that it was time to build his stamina and practice his swings. Lise approached Minori, gently ruffling her hair and telling her that recovering after mana depletion was impressive. Minori responded that she wouldn't lose either. Lise thought about how composed she had been just a moment ago and found her cuteness charming enough to let it slide. Then he said that now that Jin had learned to channel mana, they needed to move on to the next phase of training to awaken his hero factor and generate mana. According to legend, awakening the hero factor required companions to overcome hardships together. Lise felt a bit uneasy about having little Jin at his side, but even if he joined them, they probably wouldn't face any real challenges. Just then, Minori called out to him, urging him to look ahead. As they looked forward, they spotted Vritra, the dragon, who approached them, saying it had been a while since they last met. Lise remarked that it was quite an early return and questioned whether it wasn't too soon for Vritra to be out of mana. The dragon agreed, explaining that the mana Lise had given him was far from depleted. More impressively, he demonstrated his abilities by shining brightly and transforming into his baby form, which delighted Minori. She exclaimed that he was all squishy. Lise mentioned that it might be because Vritra's body was originally composed of pure mana. Minori stated that it was a reflection of his mana and said she was going to call Jin and prepare some tea. The dragon settled on Lise's shoulder, prompting her to ask why he had returned so soon. Vritra replied that the outside world felt uncomfortable with all the demons lurking about. Lise continued, noting that with the Demon King's revival just years away, monsters and demons were gradually increasing their miasma and starting to gather. The dragon asked if Lise was aware of this as well. Lise responded that he had seen it in the memories shared with him by the dragon. Vritra explained that this was why he had decided to stay for a while. Lise was shocked to learn that the dragon wanted to remain with them. Vritra stated that he had resolved to defeat the demons in order to regain his peaceful slumber, and if he stayed with Lise, they could defeat the Demon King together. Lise referred to him as a fickle dragon, but Vritra countered that he was not the one destined to defeat the Demon King. Instead, it was the kid with the hero factor who was the true candidate. The dragon asserted that once Jin awakened his hero factor, neither the magic nor the factor would claim all the glory for itself. Lise thought it was a devious notion and then told the dragon to just watch, as humans could change quickly. That night, while the dragon was sleeping, Jin was practicing his sword techniques outside. As he looked at his palm, Minori approached, appreciating his hard work, but she cautioned him not to overdo it, reminding him that impatience dulls the sword. She handed him the tea she had brought and they both sat beneath a tree. Jin pondered whether someone like him could truly become a hero. Despite all the help he had received, he could only manage to use a small amount of Lise's mana, and he felt the pressure to live up to Lise's expectations. Just then, Minori interrupted his thoughts by asking if he remembered the fairy tale where the hero defeated the Demon King. He agreed, mentioning that he had read that story countless times since he was little and had always looked up to those heroes. Minori pointed out that even the hero in the fairy tale wouldn't have been called a hero if they hadn't defeated the Demon King. It wasn't that they could defeat the demon because they were heroes, they became heroes because they defeated the Demon King. She then stood up and told him not to get too caught up in those thoughts, and to focus on what he wanted to achieve. Curious, Jin asked her how she could work so hard. She replied that it was what Lise had said about defeating the Demon King, adding that he had once mentioned that even if it took hundreds of years, they would eventually defeat him. Minori added that even if they couldn't defeat the Demon King, Lise would surely find another hero factor, and they would embark on new adventures with fresh companions, eventually overcoming the demon threat. She noted that even if she stayed with him until her death, it would just be a small part of Lise's life. Minori was certain that both in the past and in the future, many would admire Lise, but that thought frustrated her a bit. She didn't want to tie their future to someone else. While she was still alive, all she wanted was to be by his side and help him. even if it meant becoming a hero herself to defeat the Demon King. She asked Jin if that was okay. Jin smiled and replied that she was incredibly cool. The scene shifts to the 365th day of training, where Minori and Jin stand facing each other. She uses advanced fire magic, conjuring a flaming sword. Jin thinks to himself that now is his chance. He activates the magic jammer to block her attack. Minori remarks that no matter how many times he extinguishes her flames, she can still use the enchantment. He replies that he won't allow her to do so, and even as he clashes swords with her, he feels it isn't enough. He realizes that magic jamming alone will not be sufficient to defeat Minori. A dragon perched on Lisa's shoulder watches the scene unfold. The dragon comments on Jin's progress, noting that his magic control and swordsmanship have improved drastically over the past 6 months. Lise points out that he had already mentioned how quickly humans adapt. The dragon replies that despite this progress, Jin's level is still not enough to impress him. Lise suggests they make a bet. If the dragon is surprised by Jin's growth during the match, Lise will grant him one request. The dragon agrees but notes that the opposite is also true. He expresses his confusion about humans, wondering why, if they only live for about 60 years, they push themselves to such lengths. Lise explains that it is their obsession with their dreams that drives them. The dragon acknowledges this, reflecting that for a long-lived species with a lifespan of over 100 years, they think remarkably like humans. Lise replies, astonished, that it is indeed unbelievable. Then Jin reflects on how he has lived as a human for 30 years, and he mentions that the dragon is shining. As Minori attacks Jin, he recalls that this is their 365th match, and he has started to pick up on some of her habits. The dragon flies nearby, commenting that it isn't a bad performance. However, as he approaches the duel, Lise warns him that it is too dangerous to get too close. The dragon reassures her not to worry. Minori then unleashes her super magic. The dragon notes that it is an intense fight, and the heated battle is worth watching. Just then, Minori employs the Blaze Vortex sword, which shocks everyone. The dragon finds himself in the path of the attack, and Jin rushes in with his sword to save him. Lise and Minori are astonished by Jin's daring move. Minori quickly rushes over to check on the dragon and Jin. The dragon, feeling somewhat singed, comments that he nearly got roasted. Minori apologizes, explaining that she got carried away and used a powerful spell. Lise reminds her that she had already warned the dragon not to jump in, so it's all his fault. Jin reflects on the magic jamming spell he cast on his wooden sword beforehand. The dragon turns to him, expressing his admiration for Jin's newfound ability to use magic. Jin humbly denies it, stating that it's just a new feeling. Lise explains that this is what Jin has been striving for, the magic he has created with his own power. Jin is still surprised by the realization that it is indeed his own power. Lise emphasizes that the most important aspect of casting magic is visualization and asks what Jin was currently imagining. Jin replies that he would guess Lise could call it his body moving on its own, driven by his desire to save the dragon. Lise contemplates this, concluding that this must be how the shield took form. He shares his insight that the desire to protect someone may be the true source of Jin's power. Then Lise asks Minori what she thinks. She replies that her full power attack was completely disregarded and feels that it was a powerful spell. Lise reflects that finally, on the 365th day, Jin has completed his fight without ever falling to his knees. As the four of them eat inside the house, Lise announces that they will move on to the next stage of training starting the next day. He notes that Jin's magical capacity has grown immensely, and he is ready to awaken the hero factor. Lise explains that he wants Jin to learn real combat to facilitate this awakening. Jin wonders what real combat entails. Lise thinks that he will find potential allies for the future heroes. He mentions that first they will hunt monsters in the area with Minori. Jin becomes excited upon hearing this. He asks what's wrong with him, adding that he has heard about powerful monsters appearing everywhere and causing a lot of damage. He realizes he may have to fight alone without magic if Lise cannot recharge him. Jin acknowledges that it might be selfish, but the cool adventurer he aspires to be is one who protects everyone, and that is exactly what he feels he needs to do. Minori reminds him of the lessons she taught him. Jin expresses his belief that this path will make him stronger and that he will rely on Lise while he is there. Lise thinks about how Jin still wants to be an adventurer, even after his party betrayed him. In reality, Lise wants to protect his loved ones, but he recognizes that this desire is also Jin's strength. Lise mentions that there is a condition. He wants Jin to take the dragon with him. This surprises both Jin and the dragon. The dragon mentioned that he hadn't heard about those things. Lee's replied that it's because he just decided now, pointing out that since he and the dragon made a bet, the dragon ultimately lost. This reminder shocked the dragon. Lee's added that, to avoid being sealed again, the dragon should learn more about humans. The dragon understood and declared that he would witness Jin's journey. Jin responded, feeling reassured. Minori then asked Lee's if that was acceptable. Lee's replied that the dragon would serve as the ultimate bodyguard and that awakening the hero factor requires allies who can wield all 4 elemental magics. Since the dragon can use fire magic, he would fulfill one of those roles someday. That night, Jin packed his belongings and informed Lee's that he and the dragon were leaving. Lee's agreed, thinking that he expects Jin to become the hero who protects everyone. Minori noticed Jin's expression and remarked that he seemed lonely. He acknowledged her observation, saying that while Jin was leaving, more importantly, he felt a bit left behind because Jin was so bright. Minori reassured him, saying that Jin was the type who could work hard for everyone and that she was sure he would always be by Lee's side. Lee's looked at her, and taking her hand, admitted that he had always been scared. He feared the inevitable farewells, knowing he lived on a different timeline than everyone else, but he realized that this was just running away. He reminded himself that Minori and Jin lived earnestly, and that by using Lea's lifespan as an excuse, he was not truly living in the present, just as he hadn't in his past life. Suddenly he kissed Minori, thanking her for everything and expressing his love for her. He reflected on his desire to live alongside her for as long as possible. Overcome with emotion, she hugged him tightly, saying that she was so happy and that as long as she lived, she would support him. Lee's thought to himself that he would do everything he could to ensure they could be together. One morning, as she practiced outside, Lee's approached her, asking for a moment of her time as he needed her advice. She wondered what kind of advice he was seeking. They sat under a tree, and he explained that with Jin gone, and while they waited for his hero factor to awaken, he had been contemplating what they could do next. She noted that they couldn't just sit around doing nothing, and she thought that living alone again had been blissful for her. Lee's then suggested that they should head to the demon realm. He pulled out the map that the dragon had given him, pointing out the great circular forest, Vastera, which lay far beyond their current location. Deep within that forest was the resting place of the demon king, Lestesia. Surrounding it was the demon realm, where demons lived. She felt a shiver of fear at the mention of demons in the forest, recalling how they had always been told that demons were extinct, making it hard for her to believe. Lee's explained that they had simply been unable to perceive their existence, mentioning the perception interference magic, which was similar to their elven barrier. She replied that if this was true, then they were far behind in their knowledge. Lee's admitted that, honestly, they knew next to nothing about demons, their biology, their numbers, and even the Demon King's goals. They needed to ensure that Jin could defeat the Demon Lord, and for that, they had to understand their enemy. She mentioned that in Jin's generation, it was different. Lee's then brought up Minori and asked if she would come with him. Excitedly, she agreed. Lee's thought about the 3 years ahead. If demons invaded, Jin and the Kukure fortress would be on the front lines. To stay with Minori forever, he had something important in mind, and he was determined to do everything he could. A week later, they were walking through the forest when they spotted a bush. He wondered what it was. Minori said she didn't see anything, but as she leaned in for a closer look, she gasped in fear at the sight of a half-monster body appearing from within. Lee speculated that it must be the entrance to the gate of hell. As he used his power to enter, Minori was shocked to see the entire scenery change around them. Lee's noted that it appeared there was a one-way barrier. They could exit but not enter. Black fog surrounded them, and as they both covered their mouths and noses with their hands, Minori wondered if it was miasma. He confirmed that it was quite dense and suggested they move ahead, as the demon realm began there. After a month of walking, they entered a ruined village. Lee's remarked that they still hadn't encountered any demons since entering the demon realm. Minori questioned if something had happened on the demon's side. Observing the marks on the ground, Lee's noted that the village had been ravaged by monsters, but he could still sense magic nearby. He warned Minori not to let her guard down. She stated that they had been encountering more and more monsters, and those they faced were growing stronger. Lee's noted that the miasma was thickening, and although he was using purification magic, he asked Minori if she was feeling alright. She agreed, thanking him for his concern. He suggested they press on a bit further. As they continued walking, they spotted clothes hanging from ropes, which led Minori to comment that it seemed the village had been destroyed not too long ago. Suddenly, they heard someone struggling from a dark street nearby. A man was cornered by a pack of wolves, ready to attack. Minori exclaimed that a human was being attacked by monsters. However, Lee's quickly denied that they were simply monsters, considering they were in the demon realm. Minori wondered if the creatures were actually demons. As a few more people emerged, surrounded and frightened by the wolves, Minori sprang into action, striking one of the wolves, which caused the pack to flee. The people revealed themselves to have horns on their heads, and they were shocked to see that Minori was hornless. She realized that even though she acted on impulse, she had been scratched by the demons in the process. As Lise approached, the man exclaimed that they were an elf and a human. They expressed their gratitude for the unexpected help. A lady stepped forward, introducing herself as Korda, the village chief. She mentioned that night was falling and invited them to rest at her home as a token of thanks. Lise agreed, but this surprised Minori. As they entered Korda's house, Lise noted that it resembled an old-fashioned Japanese home. Minori quietly asked why he had so easily followed Korda. Considering they were demons, not humans, Lise agreed, expressing surprise that they had been invited. He cautioned that it might be dangerous for them there, but stated that their goal was to gather information about the demons. For now, they seemed welcoming, so he suggested they observe them closely. Korda soon returned with a cake and some food, apologizing for keeping them waiting. As she served the meal, she hoped it would suit their tastes. Lise looked at the food with appreciation, while Minori hesitated, wondering if it was safe to eat, given their hosts were demons. However, after taking a bite, she found it delicious, noting the gentle flavor reminiscent of Sylpha's cooking. Lise remarked that the food was exceptional, reminiscent of the meals made by Minori. Korda, watching them enjoy the meal, commented that it felt like her son had returned home. Curious, Lise asked if many of the ruined villages they had encountered were attacked by monsters, including her sons. Korda nodded sadly, explaining that her son had left the village, along with many of the young ones, 3 years ago. They had all expressed a desire to help the Demon King and had run off, leaving the village unprotected. Since then, she had no way of knowing if her son was alive, and the village had fallen into ruin as a result. Minori contemplated the monsters and demon attacks they had encountered, then quietly expressed to Lise that the villagers seemed like normal people, completely different from what she had expected. Korda began to pull something from a high shelf, struggling to reach it. Seeing her difficulty, Minori rushed over to help, and Korda thanked her gratefully. Minori offered her assistance again, but Korda insisted that she wouldn't allow her guest to help. Minori reflected on someone she had once looked up to, like a mother and queen, who had provided her with happy times, but they were all gone now. Korda noted that the lady would be thrilled to spend time with Minori, and Minori hoped so as well. Then Korda remarked that she could read the expression on Minori's face. Blushing, Minori introduced herself, and the two of them began working together. Lise watched their interaction with a sense of happiness and decided to step outside to meet the others. As he walked, he recalled reading in books that demons were considered the enemies of all races. However, he felt no hostility from the elderly demons in the village, prompting him to wonder what was different about the younger ones. If the Demon King were to revive, would Korda's son join him? Would Lise have to fight against him as well? After a few days of their stay, as they prepared to leave, Lise presented Korda with the spoils from the monsters they had defeated that day. Korda expressed her gratitude, and Lise replied that they were the ones who should be thankful for her hospitality. Minori added that even though they had killed the monsters, inviting the various species that were once considered enemies might still scare them. Korda noted that while the two might be from different species, they seemed to share a close bond. Both of their faces flushed with embarrassment, and Korda reminded them not to underestimate the intuition of an elder. She may be a demon, but she had grown fond of them both. They referred to her as Grandma, expressing their affection for her in the process. Korda mentioned how adorable it was and wished that those two could live in the village forever. Lise thanked her, stating that he needed to continue his journey to learn more about the world and the demon folk. The next day, as they all stood together, Lise and Minori had not yet left. He cast the ultra-high-level barrier magic, Valkyria Glitter, and informed Korda that it was an ancient barrier spell that would keep monsters away from the village as long as Lise was alive. She thanked him, saying that now they could wait for their sons to return with peace of mind. Lise noted that their sons had rushed off when they heard about the Demon King's revival. Korda mentioned that their horns were bright red, which might seem strange to humans, but demons like demi-humans such as elves could convert toxic miasma into magical power. Their bodies were adapted to live in miasma-filled demon realms, and the denser the miasma, the more magic they could harness. Minori was amazed to learn that demon horns possessed such power. Lise thought back to what he had witnessed with his own eyes, realizing that it was indeed thanks to those horns that demons could wield such magic, in addition to the internal magic they utilized for their work. He knew that they could generate external magic from the miasma in the air, which is why they had survived in the densely miasma-filled demon realm even after the hero defeated the Demon King. Korda mentioned that when they were young, their ability to sense miasma was at its peak. Back then, their horns were redder than she had ever seen, and even their faces changed. Other demons were talking, one mentioning the rumors surrounding the Demon King's revival and questioning whether there was any truth to it. They referred to their own children as foolish for their reckless behavior. Lise thought that the villagers didn't really believe in the revival of the Demon King. Perhaps they considered it just an old fairy tale, much like humans did. This belief was likely why they had been so kind to him and Minori, but the revival of the Demon King was no fairy tale. Minori wondered what if it were true and if the Demon King had indeed returned. Korda replied that all they wanted was for their sons to come back safely. Lise then recalled his conversation with Grillet and thought about how he had always aimed to defeat the Demon King. However, if he did so, he would have to kill Korda's son as well. Just then, Korda remembered she had forgotten to give them something. A man then brought out an old, worn object, and Korda explained that it wasn't much, but it was a token of gratitude for protecting their village. As they opened it, Lise realized it was a grimoire. Minori noted that it seemed ancient and was written in the demon language. Lise was shocked to realize that it was a priceless historical document, with only a few copies existing in human territories. Minori closed the book and urged him to pull himself together, reminding him that it was time to say farewell. He asked for a quick peek inside the book, but she denied him, insisting that if she let him have it, he would spend all day reading. She told Korda that given Lisa's reaction, it was the best thank you gift they could receive. Korda expressed her happiness that the book would be useful to them. Lise then asked why she would give such a precious book to them. She replied that she believed his words were sincere and that he genuinely wanted to understand their world. Moreover, they had protected their village, and she felt it was important to believe that their sons would return and that they would try their best a little longer. Lise reassured her that their sons would surely return, and Korda noted how kind they were. Finally, they left to continue their adventure deeper into demon territory. The scene shifts to a month before Lise and the others departed from Korda's village, where in the guild, a lady told Jin that she was afraid he couldn't accept guild quests alone. He was shocked to hear this. Other adventurers spoke about him, referring to him as the porter from the Crow-Snail party, but they had heard he had died because he couldn't use magic and hadn't been able to escape in time. Then a dragon asked the lady if Jin wasn't considered a full member. She replied that for safety reasons their guild required at least 2 E-rank adventurers to accept quests, and she apologized, explaining that pets didn't count toward the required number of members. Moreover, since Jin couldn't use magic, there weren't many quests he could complete. Jin and the dragon sat down together, and Jin appeared visibly disappointed. The dragon told him it was hopeless. Jin lamented that joining different parties had been a total failure, and it seemed like everyone in town knew he was unable to use magic. The dragon patted him on the shoulder, adding that not many fools would willingly take on someone who couldn't use magic. Jin replied that the dragon didn't have to be so blunt. He thought that even though he had left his masters with determination, he couldn't let that discourage him. Just then, a boy came over to sit next to him and remarked that he had seen Jin earlier at the guild. He asked if it was true that Jin couldn't use magic but still wanted to be an adventurer. The dragon wondered where this boy had come from so suddenly. The boy explained that he had just arrived in town and was alone. He then offered to form a party with Jin, stating they could handle the horned rabbit extermination without magic and that he would take care of everything if needed. He added that he didn't mind if Jin had a pet. The boy introduced himself as Raiden, and Jin shook his hand, introducing himself in turn. They both smiled, and Raiden said they should get along and leave the rest to him as the village's best earth mage. Jin was taken aback when Raiden mentioned that he had just captured a rabbit, asking if it was true that Jin couldn't use magic. Jin confirmed this, explaining that he had felt how inconvenient and difficult it was without magic, and that he had realized this time and again. He still had so much training to do, and to get closer to his master's level, he needed to work harder and harder. With that, he rushed toward the forest. Raiden was surprised to see Jin and remarked that he was just helping out a bit, but it seemed he had teamed up with an absolute monster. That night, the Crow-Snail party, led by Ryuk, was sitting in a corner, while 2 other adventurers nearby were discussing the Crow-Snail's rise to prominence. They noted that the party had been a rising star until a year ago, but rumors about Ryuk killing his own members had brought them down, especially regarding their porter who couldn't use magic. However, there was a rumor circulating that the porter was still alive and that he had suddenly shown alone at the guild, now teamed with some country bumpkin. Ryuk interrupted the conversation with a glare, asking if that was really true. Raiden was battling a monster, using his magic to strike, but the creature dodged and rushed toward Jin. As Raiden asked Jin what to do next, Jin activated his magic disruption with a jammer and, wielding his sword, killed the monster. Raiden remarked that Jin had truly accomplished that feat. Jin replied that it was all thanks to Raiden's brilliant misdirection. Raiden reflected on the 2 weeks since they had joined forces. He didn't seem to possess any magical power himself, but he could sense magical output and waves with remarkable clarity. His swordsmanship exhibited zero wasted movement, and he wondered what magical energy was stored within Jin's wooden sword. He called out to Jin, acknowledging that he was truly something extraordinary. As they approached the receptionist at the guild, tension hung in the air. She confirmed that their mission was completed, and the D-rank party, Hopeful Travels, was now officially promoted to C-rank. They celebrated, receiving their bronze-found buttons, while Raiden noted that other groups were calling them the up-and-coming team. However, they encountered the same old snag again. While reading the quest details, Jin mentioned that Devar was so focused on completing missions that he had forgotten the requirements for taking C-rank quests. Dragon expressed his desire for the guild to recognize him as a member and suggested that if he could return to his original form, it would all be settled in an instant. Raiden advised Dragon that they were engaged in an important discussion and suggested he go eat some meat in the meantime. Cheerfully, Dragon replied that Raiden was truly great. Just then, Ryuk approached, calling Jin useless. As Jin looked at him, the others were equally surprised to see that he was still alive. Raiden asked Ryuk if he knew everyone and then suggested that they might want to join the C-rank party. Ryuk shouted back, warning them not to mess around, as they were already a B-rank party. He then grabbed Jin by the collar, demanding to know how he dared to show his face, claiming that because of his failure, they had fallen to D-rank. Raiden watched, puzzled by Ryuk's hostility. Angrily, Ryuk referred to him as an outsider and told him to shut up. He turned to Jin, insisting that he should have died in the forest since he couldn't use magic. Ryuk questioned how Jin was still alive and urged him to just say something. Jin replied that he had been saved by someone. Ryuk refused to believe Jin's claim, pointing out that in such a situation, faced with two powerful entities, an A-rank adventurer wouldn't just be hanging around in that forest by mere chance. Jin responded that it wasn't just an A rank, there was even an S rank involved, and his master's power was likely immeasurable by human standards. Not only had his master saved him from that dire situation, but he had also taught Jin how to fight without magic. For someone like Jin, the hope of humanity's fight against the Demon King was a compelling reason to be there. Ryuk dismissed Jin's story as ridiculous, questioning who would believe the ramblings of someone unable to use magic. He then called out to every adventurer present, declaring that Jin had always been a liability, and insisted that the master Jin spoke of was merely a figment of his imagination. Jin insisted that his master truly existed. Ryuk turned to Raiden, asking if he believed that. Raiden admitted it was hard to accept the story of Jin's master, but he felt Jin wasn't the type to lie. Ryuk demanded proof. Just then, a girl appeared, hiding her body beneath a cloak. She asked Jin if he was speaking of Lisi and inquired why he wanted to know, explaining that she was familiar with Lise and believed Jin wasn't lying. Jin asked who she was. Ryuk grabbed her collar, stating that outsiders should keep their noses out of things. At that moment, the girl's hood slipped, revealing her elven features. A lady rushed over, calling for Rahab and admonishing her for disappearing without warning. All the adventurers were shocked to learn that it was Rahab, the living legend known as the Living History Book. They marveled at her presence in public, questioning why she was there. With Rahab's endorsement, they began to believe Jin's claims. Seeing the change in atmosphere, Ryuk and his party grew anxious. One girl urged Ryuk to leave, pulling on his arm, but he pushed her away, shouting for her to shut up. Just as he was about to strike her, Jin intervened, tackling Ryuk and demanding that he stop the violence. At that moment, the guild master arrived, declaring that he would handle the situation. The twin sisters sensed that things were about to take a turn for the worse. The guild master turned to Tav regarding the commotion, recalling the case of missing party members that had been reported a year ago. He suggested they investigate it thoroughly once more and decided to take Ryuk's party with him. Jin expressed his gratitude to Raiden and bowed to Rahab, thanking her for her support. She replied that she had simply intervened because she recognized a familiar name. Raiden then invited Rahab to join them for dinner, to which she happily agreed. As they settled in, a girl approached Rahab, expressing her confusion about the situation. Rahab introduced herself and the girl, stating that her name was Anastasia and that she was Rahab's current disciple. During dinner, Rahab learned that Jin and Raiden had teamed up to tackle new quests. Raiden remarked that, looking at their group now, no one would be crazy enough to join them. He pointed out the unusual combination: a physical fighter, an earth manipulator, and a strange pet. He teased Dragon, making him eat the meat and then pushing him back, saying that while Dragon boasted about breathing fire and being a legendary evil dragon, he could barely light a cigarette. Dragon protested, claiming he wasn't used to his small body, and insisted that he had once possessed enough power to slaughter an entire town. Raiden joked that perhaps Dragon would someday be able to cook a chicken skewer. Dragon retorted that it was all wrong, insisting that Lise had really tricked him. Jin interjected, asserting that Lise wouldn't make such a mistake. Rahab chimed in, stating that she believed Dragon was entirely mistaken. She sensed an unclear disturbance in the magical circuits running through his body, likely caused by using magic too roughly. Rahab continued, attributing the disturbance to the carelessness of those who performed the procedure on Dragon. She then asked if Jin was a disciple of Lise. Jin affirmed this, stating that Lise was the teacher he respected above all else. Intrigued, Rahab remarked that this made her even more interested in him. She handed them a piece of paper and inquired if they would allow her to join their party, noting that her individual rank was B, which might present a challenge for their student. Jin was astonished that the great Rahab was willing to join them. Raiden was thrilled at the prospect of adding a new member and pointed out that it would be foolish to pass up such an opportunity. They agreed to go submit the application. Jin mentioned that there were no bad elves, to which Anastasia added that if Rahab was joining, then she would too. As Jin, Anastasia, and Raiden headed to the receptionist to register as a party, Dragon turned to Rahab, asking about her relationship with Lise. Before he could think of anything else, Rahab replied that if he kept quiet about it, she would fix the magical circuits inside him. Cleaning up after a disciple's mess was also part of a master's role. Dragon felt relieved and happy to hear this, and Rahab noted that he seemed to be enjoying himself in the world. The scene shifted 6 months after Lise and the others had left Korda village. Jin and Minori were hiding, observing the movements of others. Someone nearby wondered if there were any villagers left to offer to the Demon King. Another replied that the village had been wiped out by monsters. Minori remarked that it was the dialect of Korda, expressing concern that their bad premonitions always seemed to come true.